Hello, everyone. This is Dan Verson of Dan Verson Games. I am here with Ben Smith and Kevin Verson, both Warfighter veterans, and we want to introduce you to Warfighter War, our newest addition into the Warfighter series. And we're starting off this video showing how you choose your units and what makes it new and different than tactical. Ben has chosen these units. Do you want to go through for us, Ben, of why you chose these and what makes them different than tactical units?
Yeah, sure. So I've got a huge squad here, 5 units, since I have 150 resource points, and that's because this is actually an average mission in war. Since you're dealing with the regiment level of units, there's a lot more points to play with and choices to make. So here's my first soldier, the 310th. They are a player soldier, and already I'm sure you can see some differences. Even though this is a player soldier, he does have a stat block to show his general combat abilities. He also has a supply value up here in the upper right. Now, supplies is one of the major additions to war, and it lets you activate certain abilities depending on the soldier. So, since this is an infantry, he gets access to defense, where if you roll a d10 and roll above a 6, then you can cancel an attack, and redirect, where if a hostile is targeting a more valuable unit, then you can pay a supply and make this infantry suffer the attack instead.
And I
You,
noticed that the
Mhm.
defense 6+, that text is in black and pre-supply is in yellow. What difference does that make?
Yeah, we actually have a color code system where black is something you may do at any time. Orange is something you may do, but it has to be before the attack is made. So in this example, it has to be before the hostile attack is made. You decide whether or not you're going to redirect or not. And then there's a red text that you'll see later, and that is something you must do to do the action. So for that example, you must pay a supply in order to attack with the artillery.
Ah, okay.
And since this is a player soldier, he's loaded up with gear and skills. Uh, the gear in war is pretty interesting. They can act as basically their own mini unit attached to the 310th. And they can do combat, or as the engineering company, they can support you in various ways through the mission, either lowering entrance cost for some places or healing you along the way. And then for skills, we have the first skill, which actually plays into war's combat system, which is a really interesting twist on tactical. So hostiles will one hostile will go after one of your soldiers is fully activated. So for the first turn, I activate the 310th, and after the 310th is fully gone, then a hostile will go. But that's only for normal units of yours. But since this person has a first counter on them, they can go before all of the other hostiles, unless a hostile has a first counter on them as well. So it basically goes in 3 layers. The first people go, the regular people go, and then the last people go, which you can see over here. The 709th is a good example of a last unit.
Okay, so it seems like then, like a friendly first goes, and then if there are any hostile first, they go first, bounce back and forth until no more first. And then normals
Mhm.
go, starting with a player army, they bounce back and forth. And then the last go, starting with a player army, they bounce back and forth.
Yeah, it creates a really dynamic battlefield environment because it all depends on what you choose at the beginning. I really like the first ability. It's really important to me, but you get a big discount for last units. So if you wanted to have 2/3 last units, let the hostiles absolutely pummel you, but then you can pummel them right back with your stronger force.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, when we were building the cards first skill does cost some points towards a unit's value. Last provides a discount. So a unit that has first or last will be significantly more expensive or less expensive than a normal speed unit with those same abilities.
Yep. Okay, so that basically covers the 310th. Now, on to the 83rd Battalion. This is a really interesting new kind of unit called an Armored Recon. They have the special ability Scout, which is really simple. This Scout 2 means that anytime they move into a location, they get to make a choice. They get to put 2 pin counters right here. They can put 2 pin counters either on a hostile, or if they're moving into a location with friendlies, they can remove a pin from another ally. They can remove
Pin
2,
kind of
actually.
brings up a point in that war uses pins, not suppresses. How do pins work?
So pins work the same way as suppresses for applying them. If you succeed with your attack or D10, you apply a pin. If you've played Fantasy, you'll remember pins. They're very similar to Volms. And pins give you a +2/+1 for any unit attacking. So if a hostile was attacking the 83rd Battalion right now, that hostile would add 2 to their D10 and 1 to their D6. If the 83rd Battalion wanted to remove this pin, they would need to pay an action, and then they could remove the pin.
Okay.
But yeah, Scout's very simple, but a very handy support unit to have on your squad.
So the way I could see that working is if for whatever reason I didn't have like a lot of armored, tank firepower and armored heavy tank hostile showed up, what I could do is roll my scouts in there, put a couple pins on their armor, and that would give my lower offensive ability infantry a better chance of taking on the tanks.
Exactly. Yeah, cover is a huge consideration here in war because routinely you will have to fight up against armor cover 7 to 9 even tank like brigades, and you have to have some kind of penetrating force, or you could use some recon ability to give your infantry a better chance.
Okay, yeah, because looking over on the 310th Regiment, I see that it has 0 for its penetration ability.
Mm-hmm.
So if it were going against a heavily armored hostile with like a 7 or 8, they're going to need some kind of bonus to have any chance of overcoming their cover.
Yeah, going in with a full squad of infantry would mean you are in for a struggle. They do have more health, so they can take more wounds, but you're just not going to be clearing locations fast enough. You don't have the penetration to do it.
Okay.
Unless you pin everything, and then you can slowly wear things down, but it takes a lot of time. Okay, on to the 308. The artillery is super important as this provides range in the game. In fact, they have to fire from range. And artillery is the only thing that can shoot out to range 2. Most units, infantry and some mechanized, only shoot out to range 0. Shooting out to range 1 is a pretty big deal here in war, since it represents like 50 plus miles, well, probably like 10 plus miles. It's quite a distance. But the artillery
Right.
here.
Oh, yeah. For the location cards, every location card is tens of miles. And then when it comes to the ranges for attacks, 0 is best thought of as like infantry weapons. Range 1 is more like tank weapons. And then range 2 is artillery.
So artillery is definitely something that you should have on hand, but it's pretty costly to keep it going. As every time this artillery attacks, you must expend 1 supply. And so as you can see, with only starting with 3 supplies, this thing will run out really fast. Luckily, we do have a system for getting back supplies. You can spend If you're below your maximum of 3, you can spend 1 action to gain 1 supply back. So this unit should be able to at least make 1 attack per turn, but making 2 would be a little bit more of an investment. But artillery also has a fun ability where when it hits, when it like successfully penetrates and hits with its D10, it doesn't just place a wound on the hostile, it also places a pin to show that they're like shell shocked a little.
Okay. And then if people want to, we also have attachment support units with things like truck convoys and supply depots, where if you do want to make sure that your more supply intensive units stay in supply, of course, that costs you beginning resource points, but you do have tools of addressing that.
Mm-hmm. All right, on to the 311th, I think. Not much to talk about here, just a standard squatty infantry, just here to provide those 6 health in case, and the redirect in case either of our tank or artillery gets shot at. And speaking of, we have our tank, our 709th Battalion, a 3 penetration and a chance to do 2 wounds in 1 attack, which is also extremely rare in war. I think only tanks get this ability. And
Yeah, I believe so right now.
yeah. And they also, another tank only ability is this pay 1 supply to inflict +1 hit, which is another really powerful ability, potentially making this tank do 3 wounds if it rolls really well and you invest your supply into it. But you have to be careful because when you want to move a tank, you have to have a supply there ready. So you have to make an interesting decision of whether you're going to focus on offense or if you're going to keep yourself mobile.
And it also has a minus penalty when it's firing at range 1, it looks like.
Yes. We didn't want to have the tanks be too cowardly, all sitting from range 1, acting as field guns. We wanted them to be more in the action and in combat, so we added that into the game.
Okay, so if the 709th fires at range 1, it's going to suffer a -2 on its attack die rolls and a -2 on its penetration rolls.
Basically making that second hit impossible, so it might be worth it to move up a little.
Right. Okay, and then for the location cards, on the farmland, though, we have infra, which is new, and then also engineer obstacle, which is new.
Yeah, both of those are really interesting additions to war. Infra is a little incentive to actually get your infantry in there and fight on their turf at range 0. When you shoot from range, the infra value goes down. So to represent infra, you would have a supply counter like so. And then if the tank was to shoot from the offense mission card into the farmland, you would immediately reduce the supplies by 1. And then the first friendly soldier that would enter the farmland would gain this supply onto their card.
Okay. So that way it gives you some supply along the way. And
Mm-hmm.
then that's something you'd need to pre-think to make sure that that unit that you move in is low on supply, so that way they can actually take advantage of it because they can't exceed their supply maximum.
Exactly. Yeah, the 3/10 right now would need to spend some supplies to make it worth it. But there's also the engineering obstacle, and this specific example is a regen ability. So it says obstacle 1, which means I need to get 1 engineering point in order to clear that objective. So for the engineering company, that means rolling a 3 or higher. And when I roll a 3 or higher, I get an engineering counter, put it on here to note how many I have, because there are some engineering obstacles that have more than 1. But having 1 here knows that I've conquered it, and I can heal 1 from any of my units in the mission.
Okay. So that's really handy. Then it kind of gives you an ability to regain
Mhm.
hit points or health on the move as you're moving towards the objective.
Exactly. And I think the only different thing on the location is the supplies in the upper left. That is a activation supplies. In this case, bonus, but in some cases it's a negative of you have to pay supplies in order to activate certain locations. So, for example, here, if you wanted to cross the open terrain, that would cost you a supply to do so. Or, yeah, to activate it, you would pay one supply.
Okay. Here, wait. I'm going to kind of drag that down to make sure people can see it. Okay, yeah,
Mhm.
I see how it says supply -1 there.
Mhm. Um, and a fun thing you can look at here is the hostile chart. I mentioned at the beginning that 150 is the average, and here you can see the scale for war has really been expanded. Of the lowest mission you'd ever fight in is like a 70 point, and then missions can go up to 240 points at the high end.
Okay. Yeah, and that's because one of the things that was kind of cool when we were designing war that is not in tactical is that in tactical, you command soldiers. And some soldiers are more skilled than other soldiers, but they're all soldiers. Here in war, you have infantry units, and they're of various skill levels. And then you have mechanized units, and they tend to be a little pricier because they have better range, higher cover, more penetration. And at the top end, you have your armored tank units, which are really pricey because they have all kinds of cover, penetration, great attack die rolls. Oh, there's one now. And as
Yep.
you can see, the 32nd Regiment is just, it's running around with 8 cover. It can do 2 hits, lots of movement. It can do bonus, you get a bonus on your hand size, and it is just a monster unit, which means that the resource point range that you can have is much wider than it was in tactical, and thus the scaling of the resource point chart on the location cards.
Mhm. Yeah, it's been really fun with playtesting through the whole cycle of war, seeing all of the new elements coming all together.
And that's kind of where that redirect skill on the infantry comes in handy now that we have a tank here. Is you can see that tanks are very hard to damage because they've got that big old cover of 8. But if the enemy does happen to put together a good attack due to pinning the 32nd or whatnot, they don't take a lot of hits themselves. The 32nd only has 4 health, which means that when they start getting pinned down, you will want to have an infantry support in their location to redirect those future attacks, because you're going to see, some infantry on their side is coming in this case, with like +6 to hit, +3 to penetrate. At that point, the 32nd is actually vulnerable enough that that infantry can start to hurt them. And that's when you want like the 310th or the 310th to step in and actually redirect those hits because they're more able to absorb that damage than your pricey tank units.
Yeah, yeah, and you really don't want them to fall into their lower stat block because it's just horrible. They're losing an action, -2 on all their rolls. It's a big deal.
Right. And so that's one of the key things we wanted to integrate into war is that you have armored units. They are your primary offensive force to go in there and inflict hits. You have your infantry. They're good at absorbing damage and also redirecting damage as they support the armored units. You've got artillery, which is good at attacking from a range. And then you have mechanized, which is like kind of halfway between infantry and armor, in that they do have some penetration, they do have some offense, they're kind of in the middle range for hits. And what that will do is give you a good balanced force. Just like real world armies want a balance of their forces, you also want a balance of your forces to maximize your offense and defense.
Yeah, yeah, not too much of one thing or the other. But yeah, I think that's a pretty good overview of all of the allied units. I don't think I have
Yep,
anything else to add.
I think that about does it. Thank you guys for watching, and we're going to continue making videos showing combat and all of the cool stuff that we have to offer here in this Kickstarter.